Thank you, everybody. Pleasure to meet you. Welcome to our third installment of the Information Security Symposium. We're here to talk about the detect phase. You've gone through assess, you've gone through protect, and well, what do I do now, right? So that's why we're here. Our quick agenda is introduction, the importance of data acquisition, consequence of not collecting that data, solutions, and questions and answers. I'm Lee Thomas Hagan. I'm a security operations lead here at Dataprise. I'm fortunate enough to work with a team of talented individuals. Our security analysts, on an average day, we're either responding to alarms that have been detected, or we're proactively hunting and tuning the environment which our solution sits in customers' environments. I'd like to introduce you to Joe, which you all know, Mr. Joe Schreiber.
All right, thanks. So I'm sure you guys are all sick of hearing my name. You all know where I work. Please see the booth back there. Thank you for the clicker. What some of you may not know is that I actually was the SOC manager at AT&T before this gig, so probably a company you've all heard of. Maybe you use some of their products. I don't know, maybe. They're a small company. So I think what's really important when rather than read this quote to you is kind of think about this in context or real life context. And for me, I think a lot of you are actually doing data acquisition all the time when you guys are driving, right? I think a lot of you look at your fuel gauge. You say, hey, maybe it's empty, maybe it's full. And you're using that data to determine whether you need to go to the gas station or not. And this is the same concept that we're doing. And when we look at the kind of the consequences of not doing that, maybe you ignore the fuel light on your car, or maybe it's busted. The big deal, it's not a big deal. Maybe it's slightly embarrassing for you. You have to walk to the gas station or get the gas can or come back or call AAA and pretend it was your friend or something like that. But when you do that in an IT environment, the consequences are far greater. And the biggest consequence of not doing that is being a victim of a breach. And I think what's really scary about the Verizon statistics that we put on is not that it's 146 days, is that that's the average, which means there are quite a few companies that are going way past this 146 days. And to put it back in real life perspective, the idea of that is having someone come into your office, sit down in a cube that's been unoccupied, plug in, and everyone pretends they don't exist, right? I'm sure if you saw someone working in a cube next to you that wasn't supposed to be there, you might tap them on the shoulder. But in IT security and you get exploited, you don't have that luxury. And the other consequence, and this is probably the most embarrassing part, is that you may not know. And who's going to tell you? Law enforcement, right? And the reason that law enforcement gets involved is that generally when people start owning things in your network, they start doing things outside of your network, right? Maybe they're running a where site or whatever it is, and that activity is gaining the attention of federal law enforcement. Not a good look, right? Not a great look for a company. And so why do you want to collect all this data, right, besides the embarrassment aspect and so on? The first is, remember that data collection is not always about IT security. You've heard about business resilience and so forth. There's also the decision-making process that occurs. Collecting all this data allows you to do forecasting, resource analysis, and so forth, so you can make better business decisions and not just in IT security. If you're in a business vertical that is subject to regulatory and compliance objectives, data collection is essential, right? It's what allows you to follow the compliance and also, more importantly, prove to the auditor that you are indeed compliant. I've sat through many of these audits, and the second thing the auditor is going to ask you is, show me proof. Show me proof. And guess where that comes from? Logs, right? Data. I also am a big fan of sleep. I love to sleep. I try to get as much of it as I can. And if I was on a network that I wasn't collecting information from, or I wasn't collecting data, or I didn't have a good security program in place, I would not be sleeping at night. I'm pretty paranoid as it is, but you add in the lack of visibility, you amplify that greatly. And lastly, it's about speed of response, right? So we talked about this 146 days. We would all like to cut that to 0, but maybe in a best case you get to 1 day or an hour or 5 minutes, and you can't do any of that without an indicator. That is more data. So where does all this data come from? It comes from everywhere on your network. It comes from the edge, maybe from firewalls, intrusion detection, maybe all the way inside to databases. Maybe you guys are letting people bring in iPads and so forth. Those all generate logs. These days, we also have the Internet of Things to deal with. Your refrigerator is probably generating logs, and you don't know it. But we look at this list, and the first thing I'm going to say is, well, what am I doing with all that? Where's it going to go? Right? That's lots of data. We're talking millions and millions and millions of logs that you're going to have to go through. And so the biggest solution for this problem is SIM. I'm sure some of you heard that, Security Information and Event Management. It's what allows you to collect all of this data, do central aggregation, and so forth. And once we have that data in a common place, one of the first things we can do is instrumentation. And the biggest example of instrumentation is a dashboard, right? So this is what tells you quickly at a glance what the risk in my environment is, the volume of data that's coming in, who's participating in that volume of traffic, where those logs are coming from, and so on. Very, very important. Now, once we get all of that data in place, we can actually do all the fun stuff, all the stuff that I like to do, and that's analysis, right? Whether that's through the vaulted machine learning, as we talked about earlier, or simple correlation through SIM, and so on, all of that's going to happen in this central aggregation point. And what's really important is this analysis aspect. And what this does is takes those millions and millions of logs and sifts through them to find kind of the needle in the haystack, or more importantly, the indicator of compromise, right? This is what's telling you, hey, you need to do something, right? Something bad has happened, or something is potentially bad is going to happen to your network. And by the way, if you like all of these snazzy screens that you're seeing, they are part of USM. Feel free to go see Mike and Bob in the corner. They'll show you even more of this. So lastly, I want to talk about threat intelligence, right? We talked about, we heard in the keynote about the neighborhood watch aspect, and that is a very important thing. And the reason that it's important is that attackers share information, right? We've heard about this crazy mythical dark web and so forth. What that really means is that these attackers are sharing information, and they're sharing exploits. They take those exploits and they leverage them across any target they can find. And if everyone starts sharing threat intelligence, we can actually stop those attacks from happening a second time or a third time. And that's really where the benefit of threat intelligence comes from, especially the open nature through our Open Threat Exchange.
Thank you, sir. So, solutions. One thing that we're hammering home in the detect phase is unified security management. That goes beyond just a firewall or an antivirus or any other kind of protection you have. It really ties everything in together and allows you to have more intelligent and actionable information. The behavior analytics behind that, maybe somebody only logs in at a certain time of the day, and well, all of a sudden they logged in like at 1 in the morning. Well, they're not working on a project, or maybe they're on vacation. Well, why did that happen? I mean, so, kind of figuring that out. The other kind of parts is the intrusion detection and host detection, which we've also talked about. But one thing that we really haven't discussed in quite security operations center is the people behind the tool. So any tool can help anybody out. If I need a new screwdriver, new power tool, I'll just go down to the local hardware store and, well, I'll just pick one up, right? I mean, I may be a novice. I could be a wizard with it. I mean, you could do a lot of things with a tool. A hammer can destroy or build. So it's really the people behind it and how they use it. And that's what the talented people at a security operations centers that they do. They have the specialized expertise for reverse malware engineering, the systems admins, the IT admins. It just goes on and on and on and on. And lastly, the periodic log review. It's not only about what's happening today, but it's going back in time. It's well, did we miss something there? And maybe that's an indicator of something that's going to happen. How do we strengthen that business resilience through having this visibility in our network? All right. Thank you.